Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's Steve here. Before we get started this week, I want to let you know that on BJJ Mental Models Premium, we just launched an awesome three-part series with four-time world champ Dominika Obelenite. It's about competition and the crushing emotional pressure that can go along with it. Critical listen for anyone who's a competitor or really anyone who works in a high-stress environment. Give it a shot, premium.bjjmentalmodels.com. You can check it out and get a free trial. Give it a listen. If you don't like it, cancel with no risk. Again, premium.bjjmentalmodels.com, and enjoy the show. Hey, welcome to BJJ Mental Models episode 161. I'm Steve Kwan. BJJ Mental Models is your guide to a conceptual and intelligent jiu-jitsu approach. And today, it is truly my pleasure to be joined by a living legend, Mr. Xande Ribeiro. Xande, how are you doing?
Oh man, I'm doing outstanding. Christmas time is always that time that we try to be good for Santa Claus, right?
Yeah.
So, just wrapping up the year and, having a pleasure to come and speak with you guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, Christmas time is always a special time of year for me personally. My daughter she's 4 years old now, so she's of the age where she now understands that this is a big fun event for kids, and so she's getting super excited. Every day I wake up and she says, "Dad, it's only 2 more days to Christmas." So
it's the countdown.
Yeah, she's got a countdown. It's a good way to teach kids math, I guess, is how many days left till Christmas.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I am so glad to have you here. I had recently pinged out to a bunch of our listeners to ask about some concepts to talk about. And something that I'd been asked to discuss was this idea of pressure in jiu-jitsu, which I understand is, of course, a very, very big and broad concept. But some people specifically mentioned that Xande Ribeiro would be a great guest to discuss this topic on. So, Xande, with that said, maybe before we dig in, I don't know if it's really necessary to give you an introduction. I'm sure most of our listeners know who you are, but just in case, do you want to just run down your resume and just tell everyone what you're all about?
Well, my name is Alexandre Ribeiro. I'm from Brazil. I'm known on the community as Xande, not Xande, not Xande, but Xande. I'm 40 years old, and I'm from Manaus, Brazil. I've been in the United States for about 20 years. I'm recently founding the Six Blades Jiu-Jitsu team. I live right now in Austin, Texas. Just living the dream, just teaching Jiu-Jitsu and being happy.
That is fantastic, man. Well, as someone who has been inspired by your work since I was a white belt, it is awesome to get a chance to finally chat with you. And something I would love to dig into here is I'd love to better understand and help our listeners better understand how pressure really works in jiu-jitsu. I think that sometimes people get confused about pressure and weight. People often think that pressure is a big guy thing. I mean, I remember when I started out in jiu-jitsu, I saw all of these gigantic black belts say, pressure, pressure, pressure. And at the time I thought, that's for the big guys. And I'm a smaller guy. So I didn't think this would be ever something that would apply to me. But as I get older, I realize that pressure is not just about being a big fat dude. Pressure is a strategy, and it's about being efficient. And even small, older, slower people can use pressure games effectively. And in fact, I would argue that if you're a smaller person, you should use a pressure game because it's just so much more efficient. So with that said, I'd love to maybe hand this over to you and get your thoughts on the situation.
Well, if you're the smaller person, pressure is the only thing you can use. Really, you know what I mean? Because it's gravity, Well, let me start in the beginning. So everything in jiu-jitsu is about pressure, right? We can talk about kinetic pressure, when the guy has isometric strength. You can talk about, I call it elastic pressure, the one that, you push and pull, the tension.
Yeah.
Right? Tension is always pressure. Therefore, energy is also pressure. Everything in jiu-jitsu is about pushing and pulling and pressure certain points to create some sort of reaction, right? Or things like that. But in the more specific way, I guess, let's talk about top pressure, right? When I say it's the only thing you can use, it's because if you don't use pressure, you're not using the elements as gravity and weight, I think that's very important that people understand that pressure mostly is not about strength. It's about, I would say, three things about intention, direction, and positioning. You know what I mean? So what I mean intention? Intention means you really want, right? You wanna, we have a saying, we like to appropriate from people's soul. You know, like I really want my presence. I really want my whole body, my whole volume on the top of you, right? Or maybe not on the top, but in the place that really matters, right? So therefore we come, that's intention. I have the intention to be present. I have an intention to lower my gravity, to lower my weight. I don't have to be in posture. I just put that forward. So the second thing is the direction you're going, right? So, and the thing about pressure, if you move an inch to the right, an inch to the left, that the energy can go away and the sensation of pressure can go away, right? And the third one would be positioning, be able to position your body in the right spot after you find the direction, and also we need to understand that pressure is something relative. Some people, they deal with pressure really good. And I think the reason that we from Six Blades and Ribeiro Jiu-Jitsu, we can talk about that really good because Saulo pressure game is second to none. He's about 190 pounds. That was where he competed at. 194, about 85 kilos. And the thing about him, man, once he found his position on you, you could not move that guy. You can maybe move him, but he moves connected, and that's another thing that people need to understand, that sometimes the pressure is not just about constant, it's about knowing what to relax. I remember, I don't know if you ever heard about how people call Roger the wet blanket. Right? Have you ever heard this expression?
I believe I have, yes.
Yeah, so it's not about just like one specific point. Like a basic example, right? I get into your half guard and I have an underhook and you push my neck, right? I can move away from that pressure, but I can put the pressure on my hip, right? So, and then once you move your hip, I can turn my shoulder. So there's always this constant variables that consist in pressure, and I think if you are a jiu-jitsu top player and you don't play pressure, you really, really losing the idea, right? The concept of using gravity in your behalf. I see a lot of guys nowadays, a lot of grips, a lot of speed, you know what I mean? And it's almost reckless, a lot of guys, they're able to pass guard, but they're not able to stay with the guard passed.
Yes.
Well, when they do that, it's more of a pin than a control. I understand like judo, for example, right? I tell this a lot to my students. The difference between jiu-jitsu and judo is pretty much on the pins, right? You go into a kezagatame position, now you hold with the dear life for 20 seconds and you win. But in jiu-jitsu, if you hold for a dear life for 20 seconds, you get punished.
Yes.
So how can I distribute my weight in a form that my relative weight becomes greater? Like I'm 200 pounds and then maybe, I'll turn into a 400-pound person and so forth. And I think that's what's the main thing that I feel that's missing a lot in jiu-jitsu, that people don't really teach too much the positions, how to stay heavy in positions, how to distribute your weight, how to make the proper changes between one immobilization and another. You know what I mean? And that's where it goes, like I said, it's not just one element, there's various elements. And the main thing of all, not too many people can deal with pressure. You know what I mean? Not too many people are able to become diamonds, And it's also is a slow, and you mentioned like slow older guys, especially those guys. They should for sure use pressure 100% of the time.
Yes.
Just make yourself present, drive your way forward, understand the changes and where to position yourself, and the jiu-jitsu becomes much easier along the time.
Yeah, my instructor, Don Whitefield, I believe he's a three-stripe black belt, and he's not a huge guy. He's about 180 pounds, I would say, maybe 170. And when I first started to understand how pressure really worked is when I started sparring with him, when I switched to the gym I'm at now. Because before I really fought against any pressure players, I thought pressure was just weight. You know, I remember watching early day UFC and seeing Royce Gracie sit on people. And of course, I didn't know anything about jiu-jitsu. So I thought, well, it's just sitting on people. I can do that. And I always used to thought in the early days that it was just about being heavy and flat. And when I started facing people who were really good pressure players, I realized it's more than that. You don't have to be that heavy. It's about, like you said, it's about the angle. It's about the direction. That totally changes the game. The example I often give to people is think about how a kickstand works on a motorcycle. A motorcycle is very, very, very heavy. But if you get the kickstand at just the right angle, the entire motorcycle can be held up by this tiny little piece of metal. But if the motorcycle changes the angle just a little bit, then the kickstand is going to collapse and the bike's going to fall over. And pressure is very much the same in jiu-jitsu, where it's not just about being just lying flat and distributing your weight on top of people. It's about cutting angles, having the right direction, having the right position. And like you said, also switching up between being tense and being loose at the right moment. It's almost its own art form in and of itself.
Oh, it is, and it's understanding that changing, it's not bad, it's important to learn how to change from position one to position two, because if you apply pressure in only one spot, and then, and then the person's moving, that relation between the floor, yourself, and the other people's body has changed, so it's this constant change of energy, that makes the whole magic of pressure. I usually tell people that stillness is the most chaotic form of movement. Try to just sit down in a position, close your eyes for 5 minutes. You know what I mean? Your thoughts, your heart, your breath, everything just goes out of control, because stillness is something that it moves a lot of energy. You know what I mean? Believe it or not. So when you're on the top of someone, you understand that it's not about moving a lot. It's about moving properly. They move, you adjust. They move, you adjust. They can move their hips. They can move their shoulders. They can bump, right? They can muscle you. So there's all of those things that makes a lot of difference. And the best way to do it is to actually practice being in those positions for as long as you can. Like, a lot of people, hey, can you teach me, for example, a position that I'm known for have really good position, is the mount position, right? And I tell guys, I can teach you 3, 4, 5 techniques, that matches the movement, right? Okay, the guy moves right. Okay, I go technical mount. The guy, try to bump, and then I can do a grapevine and things like this. But everything in between this movement is where lies the secret, because you need to look for that position. You need to constantly be looking for the mount position. You need to spend hours and hours and hours in that position, and I think the best way to do it many times is just train with like lower rank people, maybe not like a spazzy white belt, but like the white belt that kind of knows what they're doing, so they can frame you, they can push you and teach you how to move. I see a lot of people in tournaments, when movement happens, their first reaction is become kinetic, like isometric. And they like, you see like people moving, and like it seems like the guy wants to glue himself on the ground. And now
Yes.
it just uses strength. But a lot of times pressure is about moving as well. You know what I mean? Like the person is like this. You are a piece of bread. The floor is the bread, and the person underneath of you is the burger. You know what I mean? You need to keep moving. You need to keep adjusting, and sometimes they feel, oh man, there's a lot of pressure on my legs. Oh shit, there's a lot of pressure on my chest. Oh, there's a lot of pressure in my arm. So that changes a lot. Once I kind of realized, I think it maybe I was like a brown belt. That's when I realized the import of pressure.
Yes.
Because like the Jiu-Jitsu University book, if you guys haven't read that, the part that talks about passing is brown belt. So you go through everything in life, right? You were white belt. You survive a lot, You're a blue belt. Now you're able to escape stuff. And then you're a purple belt. You become guard development, right? Now you are brown belt. Now you're on the top, right? What are you going to do? Run away from it? No, you're going to stay under pressure. And I think that's where I start to steal people's soul. That's like a saying that we have. That's when Saul like, hey man, gotta put your presence, you gotta put your face near their face, and I think in a practical, like more of like a very, very, very practical situation. I love when I'm fighting and the only thing the guy on the body is doing is pushing me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because when you put pressure, imagine like this. We're in a ring and I put you in a corner, right? You can only move left or right. You know what I mean? And of course, you can move towards me, but then you're going to be right into my weapon. You know what I mean? So I think that's how I like to think about when I'm pressure someone, I corner him to the right, I corner him to the left, I corner him to the right, corner him to the left. Now the only thing he can do is to push. And believe me, I've fought many people. I've watched people doing conditioning. They push 400 pounds. They do all that strength, man. But I'll tell you something, 15 seconds of proper pressure will crumble a lot of men,
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful when you see the crumbling, now their movement is off. And then you see that their push is not so strong, and then you can like maybe grab a lapel and they're pushing their chest, and now there's weight, there's pressure, and you barely use your grips, and I think that's when you find that tune, that's when you feel that like, man, my body's really a weapon. I'm 150 pounds, but if I'm resilient and persistent into being present and have the right intention, I think any small guy can smash a big guy.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up. One of my training partners is a little old dude. He's under 5 feet tall, I believe. He weighs maybe 110 pounds. I think he's over 65. I think he's a senior citizen, but he's a second degree black belt and he's a pressure player. And he looks like the tiniest, most harmless, most innocent old guy. But if he gets on top of you, it is going to be a bad day at the office because he can generate the kind of pressure that you would expect out of a person who weighs 300 pounds. And so whenever you're sparring with him, everyone knows just whatever you do, don't let this little guy get on top of you or you're going to be stuck there for the rest of the night.
Yeah. Look at Marcelo Garcia, man. When you look at Marcelo Garcia, the top of people, you know what I mean? It's like you move him around, but he's just floating. That's how I know people cannot push him anymore. He was like the smallest, heaviest guy. And also look at Marcel Feitosa. Marcel Feitosa from Gracie Barra, we used to call him the coin. You could not flip the guy. And he's like, 160 pounds at the time, and people say, man, there's a lot of pressure. Celso Vinicius, there's a lot of guys like that, Roger, Rodolfo, you know what I mean? It's just that constant forward intention. That's all. Just forward intention. With your body, with your chest, with your shoulder, with your jaw, with your temple, with your forehead, with your frames, everything. Your whole body's a weapon.
Yeah. I love the point that you brought up about how pressure is about movement and reacting to your opponent and adjusting, because that's, I think, a common misconception. It's certainly a misconception I had. And much like what you just said, it wasn't until I got to around brown belt that I would say I really started to understand pressure. I always used to think that pressure was about just being heavy and squishing the guy and holding on so tight that they just couldn't move. And like you said, that means that you're generating, a lot of tense pressure. You're holding on. You're way too tense. That's what I used to think pressure was, squishing the person to the point where they couldn't even move. But I remember when I got to brown belt, my instructor had us all do a drill one day, and he basically said, okay, I need you to mount your opponent, but instead of trying to squish them, try to ride them, try to just float float on top of them and change angles so that no matter what they do, it gets worse for them. And that was a real breakthrough moment for me because I realized that pressure wasn't about being tense. It's not about holding on for dear life. Like you said, it's not about that massive isometric force. It's about floating and responding. It's not about preventing your opponent from moving. Your opponent can still move in a lot of ways, but it's just about making sure that no matter how your opponent moves, you make it worse for them every single time. You just tighten the noose just a little bit every single time.
Yeah, just make tighter and tighter and tighter. And I can know they're the one getting themselves in trouble. You know, I like I said, man, like I said, jiu-jitsu is probably the only martial art or the only sport that the possibility of a small man be a big man exists. You know, if you look at judo, 20 pounds in judo, you're done, right? 20 pounds in wrestling, you're done. 20 pounds in Greco-Roman, you're done. 20 pounds in karate, you're probably done. Jiu-jitsu, you do have a chance. You know what I mean? To survive on the bottom and to make yourself valuable on the top. You know, and I tell a lot of adults, it's interesting because I was actually teaching today, like 3 kids, a private lesson about pressure, about like, hey, I'm going to put you guys in a position and of immobilization, and I want you guys to understand. So I taught them, and that's funny because I put them, they're all like struggling with each other, but they were rushing, because I made them like, go like a Shihogatami position and to set up the mount, right? And I remember I said, okay, you guys get the mount now. And then one of the kids are like, just like moving a lot. And then he tried to mount and the kid couldn't mount. And I explained to them, I say, look, you are already in a position of advantages, right? I want you to take your time. I said, why? I said, well, because can you see this bump? You're going to see that his bump and movement is going to become slow and weaker with time. You know what I mean? And they loved it because they would go to a position and I taught them how to put weight, and I could see the kids just like flinch their faces, like they're like struggling, and they're bumping like 5-10 times, whatever, how many times. Next thing I know, they can't bump anymore, and then the other kid just boom, take them out, and it's so important. Jiu-jitsu, in my opinion, again, it's such a young martial art in a form of understanding and studying things that matter in jiu-jitsu, and one thing that people don't really talk a lot is emotional state. All right, like they talk about psychological and stuff like that, but pressure, pardon my French, it fucks your emotional. You know what I mean? Like when you get someone and like, because like this guy's so strong, okay, right? You can deal with that, right? You expect that. But now you get a little guy. Oh, he's a little guy, but man, the guy can't get away from me. Oh man, I can't get this guy out of me. Man, I'm feeling like that crazy little. How do you call that crazy thing that people like wrap their arms around it? Like the movies when the guy's like a maniac and they put the guy like
like a straitjacket. Yes,
straitjacket. Yeah, it turns into a straitjacket. And that messes with people emotions a lot, And that's when another concept taught by Saulo came around, that he would say, oh, he broke, right? So that's something that I never understood what that happened, because I remember he's talking about my jiu-jitsu with people. Yeah, man, Xande is hard to break. I'm like, hard to break. I didn't understand what he mean by that. Now I do, because I don't crumble under pressure. I don't crumble under pressure. So, of course, there's training, but my emotional state within the process of being pressured is way too comfortable even. You know what I mean? Even when Victor Hugo is like exploding my head with pressure, I'm still composed. I die with composure, if that makes sense. But that's what makes, look at like 10-minute matches, right? If you get a good position, now imagine if you can pressure someone with good technique, good pressure, good movement, good connection for about 1.5 minutes. Let's just put that 1.5 minutes, right? So that's was how my math worked, right? When I competed, when I still compete, I think to myself, I have 4 minutes to go somewhere, right? to get somewhere in the top that gives me advantage. And that happens so much, And I would get to that position, right? Now I would have another minute and a half to water this guy down until he breaks. So I would say that 95% of my fights, they were done, the ones that I finished, of course, about the fifth and the eighth minute, because I play the strategy that of course, some if things would show up before that, I'll capitalize also if the opportunity show up. And that's what happened, because I knew by the fifth minute, everyone under me would be in scare mode. They would be in emergency mode. Now they're pushing. Now they're reckless. Now they give me space. I'm progressing the position. Next thing I know, I'm in a mount position. And now their energy level is almost zero. Their emotional stress is through the roof. You know what I mean? So that's how we go, because your emotional stress takes away a lot of your conditioning.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how conditioned you are. If you're not conditioned for everything that jiu-jitsu has to offer you, you can be in the gym 10 hours, lifting weights, you will break. You will break, certainly. Doesn't matter how athlete you are. If you cannot make that muscle that works, a bicep curl, to be efficient in jiu-jitsu and deal with the emotional stress that it is to be under a human being, you're going to fail.
Absolutely.
It has to work this way.
Yeah, I love what you're bringing up here, because I actually think this is the most important thing for the vast majority of jiu-jitsu practitioners to learn. I mean, when I got into jiu-jitsu because I wanted to learn how to defend myself, right? I would venture to guess that that's probably the most common reason people get into jiu-jitsu is self-defense. Mm-hmm. The reality is, I live a pretty boring life. I've never had to use jiu-jitsu for self-defense, but what I have used jiu-jitsu for is toughening my mindset and learning how to get comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And I would guess that for 99% of the people who train jiu-jitsu, that's actually the most valuable thing they're going to get out of it. I mean, there's a lot of people, myself included, who train jiu-jitsu a lot and never used it in, a self-defense setting or even a competitive setting, but they use that mental toughness all the time on their day job, in difficult situations. And that ability to get comfortable under pressure is, in my opinion, the single most valuable thing that anyone can get out of jiu-jitsu, regardless of whether you want to be a competitor or not. And that's actually one of the reasons why I recommend jiu-jitsu to almost everybody. Even if they have no interest in competing ever, it's still good to do just because it will teach you to survive pressure, which is an art in and of itself.
Yeah, and not just that, is be able to make proper decisions in a situation of stress. We call, like with me, Tim Kennedy, and we all the guy, we call this pressure testing. You know what I mean? It's beautiful to do a kata. It's beautiful to do drills. It's beautiful to know a technique. But can you respond to that during a stress situation? You know what I mean? I say, sometimes I would rather you have a shitty technique with a lot of confidence than a great technique with no confidence at all.
Yes.
Because that's what's going to make the difference. Is how much you want it, how much you're able to make that decision, even to muscle. You know what I mean? To muscle out of something, it is a decision. It is a decision maker. Say, okay, I'll muscle it out from here and I'll recover from it. And then here goes, boom, you muscle your way out of it. Now you're in a better position. Now you're in a position to recover and maybe win a fight, And even the self-defense part, jiu-jitsu itself, if it's taught the right way, is already self-defense. The problem that I see is that people cannot take away sport from street. You know what I mean? The way you play guard, the way your awareness work. You know what I mean? Just the way you go. That's why sometimes with my students, I have them all right, guys, let's going to play guard today. The guy on the top can throw a couple smacks. You can see that right away they change their energy. Now they're a little more concerned. Now they're a little more, they know how to grab a posture. They know how to block. They know how to do things like that. And I tell the guys, guys, you can do the exact same thing in jiu-jitsu sport. But the difference is when someone postures up, they're going to posture up to open the guard. In the street, they're going to posture up to try to punch you, to try to do whatever to you. And I think when it turns into self-defense, is more bring playful ways to put the stress on them, and it's still safe.
Yeah.
And you're going to see their jiu-jitsu like their, I guess, I would call BJJ sport, right? Because BJJ sport is just a fraction of what jiu-jitsu is. And then you can do that, And even when I watch like BJJ competitions, I see that people get themselves in bad position for the lack of awareness of what's happening, and they let people control their bodies in certain ways that I believe if they would have like a self-defense mindset, that would never happen.
Yeah, yeah.
For example, a simple thing, right? The first concept of the diamond, right? The diamond concept, right? It's about distance. So I tell guys, put your hands in front of you, and that's the start, right? I usually tell people make the diamond and all that. But that's the number one. If someone's gonna punch me, my hands are up, right? If I'm gonna punch someone, my hands are up. And that's just natural, right? You can raise your hands, hey man, I don't want any problem. Your hands are still up. With that in mind, I'm protecting my face, I'm protecting my neck, I'm protecting my heart. So just to start on that, if someone's on the top of you and they can't control your neck, they can't control your shoulder, they can't control your heart, and they can't control your jaw, they can't control you. You know what I mean? Like they will not be able to control you. And now if I put my hand on your throat, for example, here goes. It's pressure from the bottom, because now you're like, man, should I put more pressure and maybe hurt my neck? And they move away. A lot of times I tell guys, I say, Xande, how do you do this? I'm like, well, I put the hand in the collar. Oh, it's that simple? Yeah, because if I put the hand in the collar, now the guy on the top feel pressure, but like, whoa, if I put pressure here, this guy gonna choke me. Now, therefore, they move away. If they move away, there's no more pressure. There's movement. Of course, I would say there's more of like a movement pressure, because when people move around you, is also pressure. You know what I mean? But we're talking about that pressure, like that someone can't move. And you play the reverse engineering of it. When I'm on the top, everything that I want to do, I tell guys, put your essence in the guy's essence, meaning put your sternum on your opponent's sternum. That's what you want. You know what I mean? Now the heartbeat, the movement, everything is locked, and the only thing they can do is the strength. And the strength doesn't last too long. What may last long is their resilience, and then we can go to other various concepts within jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I love this idea of just resilience and confidence, because this is something that I was never taught when I started jiu-jitsu. I always was just taught that, okay, here's a bunch of techniques, and if you do these techniques perfectly, then everything's going to work out properly. But I remember the first time we had a really high-level wrestler visit our school, and this wrestler was only maybe a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, but they whooped my ass because they just had so much confidence in what they were doing. And even though their techniques were not perfect from a jiu-jitsu standpoint, they were constantly moving forward with pressure. And I just wasn't used to that. I was used to training with a bunch of relaxed jiu-jitsu guys who will just, fall back on their butt and let me play guard and do what I want. And that ability to have confidence in your own game and to have the confidence to move forward and keep moving forward is just so important in the jiu-jitsu landscape. So, man, I love that you brought that up. And yeah, like you talked about, if you're the person on top doing the attack, eventually, if you can take away enough of the person's options, then you can force them into a situation of desperation where now they have to start relying on things like muscle and strength. And that's what you want, because that means, like you said, that means you started to break the person. You've broken their composure, and now you're starting to whittle away at their energy and their stamina. And then before long, you're going to be able to secure a good position, a pass or a submission. I remember, who is it? I think it was Fabio Gurgel did a tour seminar up here in Vancouver and was talking about this. And one of the things I remember him advocating for was when you pass someone's guard, don't make it too easy. Everyone's in a big rush to pass the guard and secure it, but he was talking about how sometimes you want to get 80% of the way there, and then just hold the person in that position and make them work, make them try to regard, make them think there's hope, and then take that away from them. And I thought that was such an interesting strategy, because I was always taught, go, pass, get it done, secure. But he was talking about how use pressure, get part of the way there, but leave enough of a window of hope that the other person starts burning and wasting energy, and then just close that door on them and just break their spirit. And I thought that was such an interesting psychological trick to play on someone when you're trying to pass their guard.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Even myself, there's always that little moment, almost like in a pause, when you're passing, you're like, okay, I just passed this guy. Am I going to do it? And not going to do it? You know what I mean? You give that little extra push. And also, usually that's one concept that I tell my guys, you know what I mean? The whole flow, pressure, finish idea. Like, I see a lot of people, they muscle too early. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Using strength is not a problem. You know what I mean? Like, the whole saying, when push comes to shove, I'm the one shoved stronger. So go to whatever you can, be as technical as possible, use all the concepts that you can. Once you find a stalemate, then you use your strength, because your strength will be greater than the other guys, because he's already tired, he's already fatigued, he's already emotionally broke, he's probably already thinking, shit, this guy already passed my guard. You know what I mean? And that's when you do the rest of it. Sometimes, like, even when I'm training, I just make myself heavy. I don't really. Sometimes I can see an option there. I like what I call check corners. You know what I mean? All right, I'll put pressure. Let me go to the right to see what his reaction is, and I just feed to the right. Oh, that's the reaction. Now I feed to the left. Oh, that's the reaction. Now I feed forward. Now that's the reaction. Now I move away. Now there's the reaction. Now I can kind of map and scan what's happening. You know what I mean? I say, okay, let me reverse that now, right? And you can kind of play with that. Let me go left. Let me go back. So I keep playing with all this just basic 4 angles, right? Back, forward, backwards, right, and left. And I was like, okay, now I start to combine them. I go a little right and left. And that's, I know you can see that their movement, you start like not following.
Yeah.
And I would say that half of the time I would just go forward and it's all crumbles. It's so fun. You know what I mean? The side smash, the side smash for me is the most amazing pass ever. You know what I mean? Someone puts the shield on you, you're able to crumble that shield and just climb straight to the mount. That's I think that's the most pleasant way to really make someone feel like they're worthless. I just love it. Like side smash. I like all the old school passes. All the stack passes. They just mean. They just feel good, knowing that.
They're also so efficient too, which is the beauty of them, right? You can do most of those passes without ever even breaking a sweat, which becomes very important as you get older, as you become more injury prone, you have less energy, you're fighting younger, more athletic people. If you can pass guard without even breaking a sweat, it's just so efficient, and that becomes increasingly important as you get older in your journey.
Well, and that's what I see with this generation now. I think what's going to happen once they get older, they're going to have to relearn jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Because they're so fast. They're so fast and they're so strong that sometimes I think to myself, let me see if this guy drinks 10 beers, have a hangover, and go train next day, if they can actually do something. Because everything is strong grip. Fast. And then once something happens, they'll put some pressure out there. It shouldn't even be a matter or a subject of saying that's like old man jiu-jitsu. That's like, no, this is just jiu-jitsu. I think if it's a technique, it works, and it follow the procedures of, the leverage, the momentum, the timing, the patience, I think is any jiu-jitsu. I keep looking at these people promoting things like, oh yeah, jiu-jitsu for old people. I'm like, well, I don't think there's any jiu-jitsu for old or young people. For me, there's just jiu-jitsu. Of course, like, you can't run, like people run a lot of bullfighting nowadays. But I think back in the day, I'll say like when jiu-jitsu was like, something younger, there was only one way to do jiu-jitsu was to put pressure, force half guard, go old school, maybe one or two bull passes, and cross knees, And I think that's where jiu-jitsu is, I don't think there's such things as a jiu-jitsu for a bigger, smaller, or of course, let's open a parenthesis with like, physical attributes, right? Some people are more flexible, less flexible, right? But I think in general, what's fundamental in jiu-jitsu is the equal for everyone. It doesn't matter if I'm 100 years old or I'm like 10 years old, right? So it's a matter of a choice, right? So maybe I'm a 50-year-old guy that want to move fast. Yeah, he'll move fast, but he knows if he's tired or if he wants to conserve energy, that he can use the attributes of jiu-jitsu: positioning, gravity, weight distribution, connection. This is all there, But I see a lot of the BJJ that's presented in competition. It's a lot of moving. It's a lot of pushing, moving, like, you know what I mean? There, because there's, in a way, competition is taking away the beauty of jiu-jitsu, because the fact that you have to accomplish something in such a short time takes away the essence of jiu-jitsu. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. And I've kind of felt the same thing too. It's funny. Something that my instructor once told me was that when you're young and you've got a lot of cardio and you're fast and you're not worried about injuries, there's a lot of people at that point in their game who can use what I guess we could call modern jiu-jitsu styles, where it's very speed-based, timing-based, reaction-based. But as you get older, everyone is going to gravitate towards the traditional jiu-jitsu, because an armbar is always going to work for everybody. A stack pass is always going to work. You don't need to be a peak athlete to do a stack pass or an armbar. But a lot of the modern things that you see are, I would say that they're less about pressure and they're more about timing and speed and momentum. I actually find that sometimes watching modern young athletes in jiu-jitsu, it's more like watching boxing than it is like watching jiu-jitsu, because the focus is not always pressure. The focus is timing and speed and reaction. And I'm not going to say that doesn't work. Clearly it works, because people win world championships with that. But you can't do that for the rest of your life. By the time you get to your mid-30s, if your game is speed-based, you're probably going to, like you said earlier, you're probably going to have to relearn jiu-jitsu. And you will eventually come back to the fundamentals, because they are timeless, right? They transcend physical attributes, and they're always going to be there for you. Whereas, I mean, if you're 60 years old and you have a bad hip and a bad knee, I don't think you're going to be doing speed barambolos on people, right? I just don't think that's going to be what you do. You're going to be going in for knee cut passes and pressure passes and stack passes and the stuff that you learned in your first month. So I think that is interesting. I agree with you that sport has deviated. It's still clearly effective, but I would say it's not timeless. Sure. It's not timeless in the way, I mean, our mutual friend Rafael Lovato Jr. talks about the timelessness of jiu-jitsu. And I would say that a lot of the things that are winning right now, they're not timeless techniques. They're still effective, but perhaps not timeless.
No, not at all. And it's unfortunate that people just see competition, BJJ, as the great, growl of jiu-jitsu. That's what represents jiu-jitsu. I tell guys, for example, all right, guys, you guys are in side control. What's the first thing that you got to think about? Oh, escape. No, it's survive. You know what I mean? Because who said you need to escape? First of all, right? I'm on the street, right? This guy, super heavy, is at the top of me, right? Am I going to escape right away? No. Let me see if he actually opens a window for me to escape, right? And then I can use my technique. Like when a big guy's on the top of you, right? Like the technique will still work, but your intelligence to use the technique in the proper timing, that's what makes the difference. So when I train with Victor Hugo, for example, if he sides control me, I'm not moving. I'm going to just protect myself. The guy's 300 pounds. I'm going to protect myself, and I'm going to wait until he gives me something that I can use against him, right? So if, for example, the guy, gets me in half guard, And now he goes and super holds me and holds me as strong as his possible can be, and I can feel like his whole body's shaking. Am I going to fight against that? No. I'm going to position myself and I'm going to wait until that energy goes away. Okay? Now, I'm on my Wednesday morning competition class, right? If Victor Hugo Sides controls me, I'm going to do every single thing I can to get this guy out of me. You know what I mean? Because it's competition. I'm supposed to use strength. I'm supposed to use conditioning. I'm supposed to use everything to get out of there. You know what I mean? And that's the difference. And that's what people don't understand. You know, like, okay, someone pass your guard. All right, stay there. You know, block the attacks. You know, and maybe the guy gonna move, and you go and you escape effortlessly. You know, and the game is still going, and you did a perfect position. You didn't have to use the strength. You didn't have to use like the dark side, right? You know, the dark side, strength or flexibility. You know what I mean? You use the technique, and I think that's where I usually try to explain that to my students, that the finesse and the essential part of jiu-jitsu, there is no time. There is not a time limit for you to escape something. You know what I mean? The only thing that has to happen when you're in a bad position is one, surviving, and two, not let the person progress.
Right.
If those two things does not happen, everything is fine, because point system is just a fun way to play jiu-jitsu, but it's not what jiu-jitsu is. I see a lot of guys that go to a practice, passes the guard, takes the back, mount, pass the guard, sweep, right? They did everything that competition says is like, oh my goodness, this guy is amazing. And then what happened? The guy that gets the guard pass, the guard mount, he goes to one position, finishes the guy. Who is more efficient in this point?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And those are the things that you need to compare. I want to tell a story. So that's when I wanted to be like, man, my jiu-jitsu is not efficient, right? So brown belt, right? I was a brown belt competing worlds, and I beat this guy 26 points, right? I scored 26 points in the competition, right? I'm like super stoked, right? Oh yeah, I scored 26 points. I'm like super happy. I'm like, you know, showing off that like, you know, I score all these points. My brother looks at me, well, you just showed me that you can't finish anybody and you lose every single position in jiu-jitsu. I got so disappointed, right? I got so sad at first, you know, like, what is this guy talking about? Like, I scored 26 points. Like, I was proud to have scored 26 points. And then he tells me, he say, look, if you're not good enough to finish the guy, okay, it goes 26 points, right? So you probably pass, mount, and took his back. So that means you're not efficient in none of those positions because you should be able to finish him. I was like, he's right. You know what I mean? He's totally right.
Yeah, the only way you can get that many points is if you lost positions and then had to fight to get them back again, right?
Exactly. You know what I mean? And it just, like I said, it just show that you can't keep anything in life. You know, you keep climbing the mountain, you fall from the mountain. You climb the mountain, you fall from the mountain. You know, so, and that's where I try to explain my guys. I say the ultimate thing about jiu-jitsu is one, surviving. Two, finish. Everything in between you're surviving and you're finishing, it's just playful games. You know, it's just playful games. But again, just making clear, we're talking about romantic aspect of jiu-jitsu, right? Of course you want to have a good guard. Of course you want to have good passing. But if you really master surviving and if you really master be able to finish people, you're going to gain all of this in between. You know what I mean? Because for you to finish someone, you either have to be good at like catching people or good at some sort of position, right? So you can't just catch people, you know? And I think that's how it goes, you know? And also, speaking on pressure again, it's like when you're a guy that is on the top and you like to put pressure, you like to get the mount, you get everything, you got all the benefits, you know? You don't waste so much energy. You're more efficient with your body. The other guy wastes way more energy than you, and you just have to gain. So if you do not use pressure, you losing a lot. You know,
Yeah.
and also if you think that scoring million points is the best thing in jiu-jitsu, no, it is not. Again, it's just show that you're inefficient with your finishes.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from here. I mean, I'm not going to begrudge anyone for doing what they have to do to win in a competition.
Oh yes, definitely. Look again, Steve. We're not depreciating what people do to win, right?
Yeah.
Because it's winning, right? It's a competition. You gotta do what you gotta do, right? What we're talking about for our listeners to understand is that we're talking in like a very how would I say?
I like the way you described it as romantic, like the romantic idea of the
yeah,
idealized version of jiu-jitsu.
The idealized version of jiu-jitsu
Yeah.
versus what people do in competition.
Yeah. And I do think it's important to be in tune with that romantic version of jiu-jitsu, because my belief is that probably 90 to 95% of people who train, they train not because of the competitive scene, but they train because of that romantic aspect. And even the people who are competitors, they will eventually retire and come back to that romantic aspect of jiu-jitsu. So I sort of see that as the beating heart of jiu-jitsu, right? The philosophy of it. The place I first saw it was, of course, Jiu-Jitsu University, one of the only jiu-jitsu books that I would still to this day recommend without hesitation, because most of the old school jiu-jitsu books, you could argue they're out of date. There's better ways to teach now, but I believe that Jiu-Jitsu University is timeless. And the reason why is because, in my opinion, it is the first place where jiu-jitsu started to become conceptual, and we started seeing like the ideas behind jiu-jitsu form. And you brought this up earlier. The thing I love about that book is it almost is structured like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where it talks about first you survive, then you escape, then you focus on sweeping, then positional advancement, and then finally submission. And it's kind of linked to the belt structure in that way. And I think that's such an important anchor for everyone to remember. At the end of the day, the purpose of jiu-jitsu is, if you want to talk about what it's for, why it was created, it's not to rack up points and win medals. It's not even really to get submissions. It's to survive. It's a self-defense art. So if you are getting smashed on the bottom by someone, but you, at the bare minimum, if you still have the composure to survive, you're still in a pretty good state, and you got to give yourself some credit there. And I think people sometimes forget that foundation, and they skip ahead, and they're so focused on racking up points that they forget that ultimately the goal of jiu-jitsu is self-preservation. And that should always be, much like how you talked about earlier in boxing, the most important thing in boxing is chin down, hands up, right? Anything else that you do, it's all going to be built around that base defensive structure that you're always supposed to have. And I think in jiu-jitsu, it should be the same. The core of your game should be always be composed, always survive. Everything else on top of that is just window dressing, right? At least in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
And again, just to kind of like to wrap it up, because people are like, oh, like I said, competition jiu-jitsu is a fraction of what jiu-jitsu is, And jiu-jitsu is for everybody, Let's talk about like a guy that doesn't have an arm, for example. You know what I mean? He still can play jiu-jitsu. He's going to do on his limitation, right? And I think that's what people need to understand, that you first teach jiu-jitsu as a educational matter for martial arts, to get people to be martial artists, to understand the romantic side, the efficiency of things, and the end goal of jiu-jitsu, right? And in the process to achieve this end goal, now we get the fun stuff. You do no-gi, we do MMA, we do competition, we play. Like, even people tell me like, oh, this is not legal to do. I would say, what is not legal? Oh, ripping the leg. Who said that? Like, the IBJJF, as example, they're not like, they are, of course, the most traditional federation. They're the one that been doing tournaments and evolving and doing everything for so long. But there are things in jiu-jitsu nature that IBJJF banned for being something that it's a little more dangerous, right? I started jiu-jitsu, okay, in 1991. Let me tell you something. As a 10-year-old boy, guard pass was 2 points, not 3, right? So I don't know if you ever knew that. Well, once upon a time, guard pass was 2 points. Do you know what was 3 points?
I'm going to guess. I actually have no idea, but I could guess. I would guess side control, but I don't know.
No, well, side control is guard pass. Good,
Yeah.
good. Actually, you correct me because I tell people points should not be awarded. Well, anyway, but now we can criticize the rule. It's not about guard passing. I think it's about side control.
I agree.
It does not matter. I throw you on the ground. I do a takedown and I land your side control. That's 2 plus 3.
100%.
Should be. But anyway, knee on stomach was 3 points when I started jiu-jitsu. Yeah. Can you believe that? You know how hard it is to put the knee in the stomach on somebody?
That is interesting. I didn't know that, actually. I mean, by the time I started, the rules were pretty solidified, so I had no idea.
All right, here we go. As a 10-year-old, do you know why people hook the leg when someone stand up on the triangle?
I know the traditional reason why, but is there anything beyond that? Or
Well, the angle and the slam.
Yeah.
You see that nobody hooks anymore because there's no more slam. So I, as a 10-year-old boy, could slam other kids.
Yeah.
Can open it from the closed guard. That's the first no-gi open guard that I learned. You grab the guy's neck, pull into his chest, and you push down. That was my first no-gi. And guess how I learned footlock as a 10-year-old boy? By sitting back down, ripping my foot, triangling my leg, and push down the leg. Now you can imagine how the leg is positioned.
Yeah.
All of this was legal. Nothing was illegal. But of course, with time, we figured out, okay, this may be a little more danger, but that's still jiu-jitsu. Yes. I teach footlocks original way and competition way. I just hope they remember how to make the distinction. You know what I mean? So I think like when you teach jiu-jitsu only thinking about ruling, competition ruling, I think you're taking away a lot. You know, I think white belt should practice stuff because the worst thing about can happen is lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
All my students in the first month, they know footlock, they know what a heel hook is, they know what a cervical is, like the crucifix. They know all of it because I demonstrate on them. But then I say, look, but when we're grappling under sport rules, and we would like this to be avoided. Because you may see yourself in a situation that you may use street jiu-jitsu. You know, you may rip someone, you may actually be in an academy where someone is doing that against you. You know what I mean? And I think that's what's important for us to always clarify people. Just make sure everyone keep their minds open to the bigger brother of jiu-jitsu, not just the BJJ that's consolidated as a rule system in competition.
Yeah, I am completely with you there. I mean, of course, you need to know the rules you're playing by, but at the end of the day, some of those things like hooking the leg or the arm, even when you're going for a triangle, I would consider fundamentally important because of the risk of slams. I mean, I think that a lot of smaller people are probably overconfident in their triangles because they know that they are not legally allowed to be slammed. Whereas in reality, if you're going up against someone strong, that is a totally viable option.
Oh, yeah.
And it's something that I think people just aren't used to training over. And you know what? Even if everyone agrees to the same rule set, I think it's always still a good idea to keep your guard up and to just make that a fundamental aspect of your jiu-jitsu. I remember one time I was sparring with a new white belt and I was just doing kind of standard jiu-jitsu and I wasn't really worried about self-preservation. I put this guy in my guard, I put him in a cross choke, and he punched me in the face. And he was really sorry. He didn't mean to do it, but he was new to jiu-jitsu and just, you know, he'd never been choked before in his life. And I put him in a choke and he just went into panic mode and he felt terrible about it, but his instinct just took over because he hadn't trained before. And he felt bad, but I realized actually this is on me because I had gotten soft in my training. I had forgotten that that is an option. You know, if you're going to cross choke someone, their hands are still available and you've got to position yourself to take that option away from them. So even though it sucked in the moment, I actually learned a lot about it because I realized I've gotten kind of away from the roots of what this thing is all about.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's even a situation sometimes that can happen where you're just training and everyone agrees on the rules, but sometimes things just happen and it's always good.
Well, look at ADCC. You can slam, you can rip, you can do everything, right? So let's do ADCC Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah. Let's do IBJJF Jiu-Jitsu. Let's do, street Jiu-Jitsu. Let's do it all.
Yeah. I think more diversity is always better when it comes to, who you train with, get training with new people all the time, new styles. The best thing you can do is just expose yourself to a little bit of everything, right?
And also, knowledge. Knowledge is key. If you have knowledge, it's just a matter of choice.
Yeah. Well, hey, on that note, Xande, before we tie this up, any final thoughts on just pressure and concepts there? Just things that you think, man, if people listen to this and they take one thing away from it, what's the biggest and most valuable thing that they could learn to start applying pressure better? Forward intent and appropriate from people's soul. That's usually how it goes. And also that's the mean side, but I like to say play essence to essence. You know what I mean? Just connect with your opponent's essence and take control of it and stay forward. You may be swept a few times. You may be flipped a few times, and maybe even submitted a few times. But once you get it, the reward is great. So just be patient. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Xande. If people want to follow you or check out your work, how do they get it? Well, just follow, my Instagram, Xande Ribeiro JJ. Also, my school in Austin, Six Blades, BJJ Austin. Just come in and get some training and feel the pressure. Awesome. I'll put the links to that in the show notes too. So if anyone wants to check it out, they can just click through there. Cool. Thank you, brother. Thanks, Xande. And of course, to anyone who wants to support us, Premium is the best way to do it. You can get BJJ Mental Models Premium at premium.bjjmentalmodels.com. Ton of awesome structured courseware series on there. Plus, I'll review your rolling footage. You get access to our awesome community. There's a free trial, so please do check it out. premium.bjjmentalmodels.com. Xande, thanks again, man. I greatly appreciate it. Brother. Love chatting with you. Good to get a hold of you. And I think this is going to help a lot of people. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate helping guys out. Awesome. And to all of the listeners, thanks to you too as well, of course. And we'll talk to you next week. Yes.